And next, we are going to take up House File 4172. I will move to bring that before the body. And the intent is to move that as well to the General Register. I do not see any amendments to the bill. So Chair Cleavorn, to the bill.
Thank you very much. First, I'm going to say what the bill does, and then I will talk about why I'm bringing the bill forward. This bill would prohibit the assignment of legislative email, addresses, telephone numbers, and offices to anyone who is not a member, officer, or employee of the Senate or House of Representatives. The legislative telephone number assigned to a senator or representative would only be for the exclusive use and, if authorized by the member, by an employee assigned to the member. Members, officers, and employees would be prohibited from allowing a contractor or other persons to office in legislative space without prior written notification to the leaders of each caucus. House File 4172 would direct the Senate and the House of Representatives to adopt rules to implement this section and must also include remedies for violations. These remedies would be exclusive, and no court or administrative agency would have authority to act upon a violation or otherwise interpret this section of law. Okay, so that's really what the bill does. Now, I'd like to say that this is a forward-looking bill. I'm not here to litigate whatever happened in the past. It's to make sure that as we, as members, go forward, that no member of this body gives their colleagues outside of the legislature access to state resources, and that no member of this body allow assets to be used in a way that was not intended by the general public. That is what this bill is about. I call it a good governance bill. We are putting parameters around ourselves. It will impact the entire legislative branch. So how did I get here? Members, I've passed out a sheet which is intended for your use to see what I saw and why I brought this forward. In early spring of 2025, I noticed that there were individuals that I was familiar with who had state emails, were using a House district phone number, and they were using the address of the office building. And I thought, why? Why is this happening? I have moved on from why did that happen to thinking about this from a House safety, security, asset protection lens. We know that since June 14th, we receive emails that come out to all House emails. If someone outside of our body has a House email, they would also be receiving those security updates. When someone uses an @housemn.gov or @senatemn.gov, it gives credence to that individual. And while this individual may be known to us and trusted by us, once the email is given, we have no control over it. And that individual could use it for nefarious reasons. I'm not saying that happened in the past tense. I'm saying looking forward, right? We need to protect the integrity and security of the body. That is what this bill is about. When I saw that outside individuals had been given emails and use of the House district phone number, I was really shocked. So I did do my work. I wrote to IT, I wrote to the commissioner, or to the admin, I looked into whether these individuals had some contractual basis for receiving these emails, addresses, and use of our house address. And there was no obligation on the House part to provide this. So I don't want to impugn motives, but I do want us to protect our body, the entire legislative body, going forward. I also looked at what we require of the executive branch and what we put in statute for the executive branch. And it is very clear under subdivision 4 that use of state property, an employee shall not use or allow the use of state time, supplies, or state-owned or leased property and equipment for private use. It is only to be used for the interest of the state. And so I want us, the House, the legislature, to hold ourselves to those same standards. It really is about honesty, integrity, responsibility, all of the things that we have said in this committee. And I'm asking for a roll call vote. And I would like for you to stand with me and say that in our body, we hold ourselves accountable to using the assets of the public for the good of the public as it is intended. House district phone numbers are only for use with constituents. That's what we do with them. They don't belong to the legislator. They belong to the people of the district. The building is not our space to allow our friends to use. The building is the state's asset and the place for the people. I don't know how to say it any clearer, but we must be responsible and we must clean this up. Members, I ask for a yes vote.
And I appreciate the thoughtful way that was laid out. I know most of us think about from a business perspective, we want to follow good best practices going forward, and I also appreciate the forward-looking approach to your bill. Is there any member discussion on the bill? Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Cleavorn, a little bit confused, or at least I am a little bit confused. Our email addresses are public. When people write to us, they use our state email address. Our phone numbers, in many instances, are out there for the public. So is your intent to say to members that we cannot use it for private business or for the public to be careful not to use mn.gov, housemn.gov, for their purpose? Not quite sure what the exact purpose is.
Chair Cleavorn.
Thank you very much, Representative Anderson, for the question. So the public, of course, can write to us, they can call us. This is about how we interact with the systems, who we give access to the systems, right, to the space. Of course, people come, the building is open, but this was a member who allowed business associates to use House district phone number for a purpose other than constituent contact. That is not what that number is for.
Thank you. All right. Representative Koznick.
Thank you. I like this bill. I think there was just a couple questions to clarify. We've had similar discussion in the realm of non-legislators having wide access to the revisor's office on our behalf. Half the time, we have a backlog in the revisor's office, and other people outside are, yeah, I talked to this legislature later or that legislator, and they're pumping out a bunch of bills in the revisor's office, and legislators may or may not have granted approval, and it's kind of loose in terms of structure. That's not addressed in here. Is that something we should incorporate as well, or just to ask the author kind of her thoughts on that?
Chair Cleavorn.
Thank you very much, Representative Koznick, for the question. And I think it's important for you to realize that the body will be responsible for writing the rules about we're not setting the rules in place per se. We are directing the legislative entity to establish those rules on how that can best be done. And I know I don't speak for the revisor, that's not my space, but I do know that the revisor has sent us emails saying, please do not do that. Allow us to do the work that we need to get the legislative work done. And I know that if I'm working with an entity, I will say to the revisor, this is my request. This is what I need to have done by this date certain to get the work done.
Thank you. All right, thank you for that. And just as a clarification, I do know it has been fairly standard practice for some years that often, and particularly in recent years, that our leadership, I believe on both sides of the aisle, has directed us that we must have a personal hand in making those recommendations to the revisor that we not allow unfettered access to folks outside of the body, mostly because we want to prevent our staff from getting stressed out and burned out. We don't want to do that to them. We do also have Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my curiosity goes to the fact that it's not unusual for a relative or a spouse to visit for a day. And there are some meetings of which you wouldn't bring them along, so maybe they stay in your office, and they happen to get a call on their phone that has to do with their employment. The office space restriction is to not allow anyone but a member or staff to utilize that space, but if they're sitting there and answer their phone, they're utilizing that space. So I hope there could be some clarifying language because I think it's good that we have people visit us, allow our families to understand what's going on by being here. So that's the one little gray area I think that might need clarification. Thank you.
Chair Claiborne.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Quam. I think in this day of 2026, most people have cell phones that they use. I would say that that could be something that when the rules are written, incidental use by a member for personal incidental, but I do not believe, and I'm going to say this very clearly, I would never allow my husband to use my office phone. That's just me. Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
at no point did I
No.
even infer, because I specifically said they get a call on their phone.
Oh, on
So-
their cell phone? Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
no, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Because I was referring it directly to the office space utilization.
I see what you're saying.
And that's specifically what I was looking at, that technically you'd be in violation for that. I take offense that you would think I would give someone else my phone.
I would like to
call.
correct the record. I misunderstood what you were saying. That was my misunderstanding. I thought you said they were in your office and they used the office phone to take a call. That was my misunderstanding. Of course, this is the people's house. We expect the public to come into it. We expect the public to use it. Our spouses are in fact public, right? And so yes, they could come into your office during regular scheduled time for legislative business. What I would say is not prohibited, what I would say would be prohibited by this is that my spouse, your spouse, anybody else's spouse could not conduct their business using our house phone. They could not conduct their business that had nothing to do with the legislature using state assets. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping to fix.
Thank you. I do also want to remind us to go through the chair, but I thank you for that clarification. I also wanted to mention here that we do want to make a distinction that I believe the bill here, as outlined, is suggesting that we do not want state resources, taxpayer-funded resources, being assigned to outside entities. Certainly, that would not preclude a spouse or a child or someone who's visiting the Capitol to use your space when they are visiting or things like that. And I think it's generally accepted practice that we do allow for visitors to use those spaces, but we do not assign that space to them as a taxpayer-funded resource. So,
Madam Chair.
yes, Chair Cleaborn.
Thank you. So when we allow an outside entity to use our mailing address, and if they were to mail someone something with our Minnesota House of Representatives Centennial Office space, they might lend credibility to whatever that ask is inside the envelope. If we allow an outside entity to use our @house.mn.gov email address, the ask might be considered official state ask. That's the confusion that I am trying to clarify here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we appreciate, we do not want someone who is not a state employee to be interpreted as doing the business of the state. So I appreciate that. Representative Sexton.
Madam Chair, please excuse this freshman question, but we have rules in the House, the Senate has rules, and we hold ourselves to a higher standard based on those rules. Was there any request for rules changes before we had to legislate ourselves to make rules changes?
Chair Cleaborn.
Thank you very much, Representative Sexton, for the question. This is, so the use of giving outside individuals our email addresses is not protocol. When checking with IT services for the House, this is not a standard practice. This was something that was directed from a leadership level. So if the normal practices would have been followed, this would not have happened. The sergeant's office was not contacted for use of the phone number. Admin was not consulted about the use of the House address. Normal procedures were bypassed. And so that is why, if we are, I believe most of us know that our house phones are for housework. I think most of us know that we don't give friends and colleagues house emails. I think most of us know that. Yet that standard norm was breached. And so this provides clear guidelines to all staff that we don't do this here. This provides guidelines for all members. We don't do this here. There will be a consequence. Right now, we have no consequence, and it will be up to the body to determine what that consequence will be.
Thank you. Representative Sexton.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Chair Cleaborn, that was interesting, but it did not answer my question. My question was specifically, was there an approach or attempt made to pull leadership together to address this concern through rulemaking within our House rules prior to developing legislation? I believe, just as a leading answer, we should have gone that route before we come up with the legislation upon ourselves.
Chair Cleaborn.
Thank you, Representative Sexton, and I appreciate that's what you would do. I wrote a bill. I did consult leadership when I first saw it, and I was asked to keep the priorities of the House front and centered, not to let this slide, but in 2025, my priority was getting a budget across the finish line. I had, and I shared this with Chair Nash, a meeting set with Speaker Hortman, Speaker Emerita Hortman, for the week that she was assassinated. So under normal circumstances, yeah, I would have done that. But knowing that it takes a long time to get a bill drafted, as you well know, I reached out to House Research. I asked what the rules were, what we have. I received a packet of really great information. I mean, our email and computer policy, it's old. Our code of conduct, nothing. This is a serious breach. You are a military man. You know you don't use government assets this way. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree, and that's where I started with my conversation of the rules we develop for the House, which are separate from the rules developed by the Senate, holds us to a higher standard. And in fact, the way I read the enforcement, it tells us to fix our rules. I personally believe we should go down that route first before we legislate ourselves to go down that route anyway.
Madam Chair.
All right, Chair Cleavorn.
Thank you. I'm going to cut this really short. We already have written legislation for the executive branch to tell them what to do. It's time for us to write legislation to tell ourselves what to do.
All right, thank you for that. Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Cleavorn, and I think I just heard the answer that I was going to ask. The executive branch, do they follow this already? They cannot do any of this?
It is in, if you look at 43A, you will see.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Chair Cleavorn.
Is there any member discussion?
Okay, no.
Right.
Okay. All right, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and just to Representative Quam's comments quickly from earlier,
Yeah.
it does look like on 1.17, unless I'm misunderstanding, that it is talking about a non-member temporarily occupying an office in space. So it actually does address that. So to me, this bill's just not ready for this committee right now.
Madam Chair.
Chair Cleavorn.
Temporarily occupy. A visit, a day visit is not temporary occupying. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
I would say that's a pretty broad, leaving it up to someone to interpret. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I will just say, before we move to Chair Nash, I do want to mention here that what we're talking about, you know, from a business practice is pretty standard practice in any business, not even just the legislature. It's generally very understood that we don't assign office space or emails or things like that that are paid for on the company dime to people who do not work within the company. The same would be true here in the legislature. And I think it's fair and appropriate that we as legislators make sure that we are doing the right thing. And clearly there was a breakdown here. I appreciate that this is looking forward and saying we've evaluated our process, we found it lacking, and we are going to do better in the future, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And I think we've had a lot of conversations in this body about being good stewards of the people's money, of being accountable, and that starts with us as legislators too. So I just want to take the temperature down a little bit, but remind us to ground ourselves in that this is good best practice, whether you're in a private business or whether you're in the legislature, but it's more important, I would suggest, as legislators, because the resources we are using are not ours. They belong to the state of Minnesota. They are paid for by the taxpayers, and as such, we must be good stewards of them. So adding extra belt and suspenders to make sure that we're doing that the right way and holding ourselves accountable seems like a very fair and reasonable ask. And with that, I'm going to move to Chair Nash to give his closing comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chair Cleavorn, you and I have talked about this. I would direct you all, in your packets, you've got a copy of the House Rules, Section 8, Article 8, my apologies, Administration of the House. Administration of the House has a lot of the things that we should be doing in there. Chair Cleavorn, you and I talked about this. I believe that it should be put into House Rules. Let the Rules Committee dictate what's going to happen here. I would direct your attention to something that happened in the other body yesterday. There was a large Senate rules change that probably got splashed across the news. You might have seen it. But I believe that the administration of the House is the purview of the House. And I will quote somebody who we all respect, Patrick Duffy Murphy, who says, "Why put something into statute that can be handled in the rules?" And I firmly believe that. Now, there's merit to having this conversation, but I think that the conversation needs to be had in the Rules Committee. We don't need to legislate something that we're going to wind up putting in the Rules Committee anyway. So my recommendation is a no vote on this, since you decided to roll call this. I think that if we're going to do something around this, and there's merit to this conversation, but it should be done in the rules of the House, much like they tackled in the Senate yesterday. So with that, I would recommend a no vote.
Madam Chair.
All right. Closing comments, Chair Claiborne.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. But I would like to remind every member, this is not just about the House. We might adopt great rules, but this is also about the Senate, and it's about everybody who's under the legislative branch. And what I would say is that we will be adopting rules. That's what the law says, must adopt rules to implement this section. I am not going around that. Members, we have an opportunity to protect the integrity of the body. This is forward-looking. The individuals who were given email addresses knew well this was not their place of, excuse me.
One of our members asked to speak after you, and we said no. Out of respect for you.
It's going to just be brief.
Are we ready to move on?
So
Have the floor.
I'm going to ask, there is another member who asked to speak after the chairs. That is not standard practice. There were actually two members that did. The first I missed and has decided not to speak out of respect for Chair Nash. And I'm grateful, Chair Nicolai, that you did so. We have another person on the list. I'm going to respectfully ask that maybe we leave this, because I do want to, we've already had comments from both chairs, and I just want to be respectful of our process and our time. And so I would not normally say that, but I would ask that maybe we both,
I was in the middle of my closing,
yes.
and I had the floor, and the floor was disrupted. That is not
sorry, Madam Chair.
acceptable. And I would ask that you please honor my time on the floor.
Absolutely. So if there, is that all right with you?
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, hold on. Can we let the chair continue? Thank you. Chair Claiborne, please finish your closing.
Okay, so this has been a very robust conversation. I appreciate it. I have been hammered by members of this committee on social media about not standing up for transparency, accountability, all of those great things, because I wanted to make sure the OIG bill was right before it left our committee. I find it fascinating today, this conversation, when I am asking us to hold our own body, the legislative branch, accountable for what we do with the resources of the state of Minnesota. And I'm being told, don't put anything in law. Let us decide separately. Let us be the good stewards when we have already breached our own protocols. So, members, I'm going to ask for a yes vote. This is about upholding the integrity of our building. It's about good governance. It's about protection of resources. It's about when you see bright red flags, you see something, you say something, you do something. It is not okay what happened in this body. Members, I ask for a yes vote.
Thank you, Chair Claiborne. I do want to apologize to you personally. It is not standard protocol for us to interrupt someone while they are doing their closing remarks. So we want to say our deepest apologies to you. With that, a roll call has been requested. We will go to a roll call vote at this time, and I will direct staff to take the roll.
Madam Chair, before you do that, could you remind us where this is, what the referral was for?
And the referral on this specific bill is to send it to the general register.
I would like to make a motion to refer it to rules.
Excuse me, we vote on one
We're
motion.
in the midst of a roll call vote. I think we need to
you.
complete the vote first. Well, I already directed staff to
Started yet.
start it, so I'm going to let the roll call proceed.
Okay.
All right, staff, if you take the roll, please.
Chair Cleveborn,
Aye.
Chair Cleveborn, aye. Representative Nash.
No.
Representative Nash, nay. Representative Bonner.
Aye.
Representative Bonner, aye. Representative Davis.
No.
Representative Davis, nay. Representative Anderson.
Anderson, no.
Representative Anderson, nay. Representative Clardy.
Aye.
Representative Clardy, aye. Representative Freiberg.
Yes.
Representative Freiberg, aye. Representative Jones.
Jones, aye.
Representative Jones, aye. Representative Joy.
No.
Representative Joy, nay. Representative Koznick. No. Representative Koznick, nay. Representative Kraft.
Aye.
Representative Kraft, aye. Representative Nucoli.
Aye.
Representative Nucoli, aye. Representative Quam.
No.
Representative Quam, no. Representative Sexton.
This should go to rules, I'm a no.
All right.
Chair, there are 7 ayes, 7 nays.
There being 7 ayes and 7 days, the rule is not adopted and it is laid over.